Greetings, Starfighter. You are about to listen to the totally super awesome 80's Reboot Overdrive podcast. Always remember, no matter where you go, there you are. Ready Player One.
First off, we have co-host Scott. Say hi, Scott.
Hello.
And we are joined by special guest Billy Mitchell, who's owner, operator, manager of Ricky's world-famous restaurant, also proud father of 3, but most notably we have him on for Perfect Score, Pac-Man, amongst other great video games that he's done, Donkey Kong Jr., Centipede, and even Burger Time. Thank you for joining us, Billy.
My pleasure.
So, as we jumped right in there, we were talking about the time to prepare for that kind of thing. And actually, that's one of my later questions. But I understand that when you're going for the perfect score of Pac-Man, it was a little more of a competition to be the first one to do it.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. Actually, the knowledge that was gained for a perfect Pac-Man, Chris, a friend of mine, Chris and I, back in 1983, we came up with the exact scenario of what it would take to create a perfect score. Nobody else played on that level. Nobody else had that knowledge, and we shared it with Walter, and we shared it, and we just sat on it. And every once in a while, every few years, somebody would come along and would claim something silly that they could do a perfect score. And we'd ask them a few questions, and they didn't have the answers, and we knew they were just being silly. Let me just say that kindly. They were just being silly. And then one day, around 1999, once again Walter called, and he said, I got a guy in here from Canada. He said a couple of guys who say that they can do a perfect score, and that they're going to do it. And I says, yeah, sure. So I says, okay, put him on the phone and I'll get rid of him. Just like that, I said it too. So he puts him on the phone, and bear in mind, this is a guy who I'm very, very good personal friends with today. But he puts him on the phone, and I listen to his story, and I give him yeah. And I said, all right, here, I got a few questions for you. And I fired a half a dozen questions at him. And he answered all half dozen exactly as I would answer them. And I sort of sat up in my chair, and I said to Walter, I said, yeah, this is for real. This time is for real after all these years. And so there it began the race for the perfect Pac-Man. And the fact that he was from Canada, a developing country, and I was from the U.S., I certainly wasn't going to allow, the U.S. to lose to a developing country, as I say. That's what I tell him. Again, I'm personal friends with him now. But we actually first met in New Hampshire. He didn't know that I was going to be at an event he was at, and he arrived, and the day he arrived, he read the newspaper that said that I had arrived the evening before, or I was scheduled to arrive. And we walked in and we were playing. And one of the things is he calls himself Captain Canada. You can Google Captain Canada, Pac-Man. And he wears a Canadian cape, a Canadian flag. And I just wasn't going to be quite that goofy. So in order to represent the U.S., I was willing to wear my stars and striped tie, but I wasn't going to be quite as ambitious as him. Well, we started playing, and it was easy. I mean, I hadn't played for almost 13 years, and it was just such an easy win, so I thought. I get up there, I started playing, I was off and running. I was beyond the most difficult part, which was the first 20 boards, which is about 350,000. And I was off and running at 1.7 million on my way to 3.3, and to put an end to it. And suddenly out of nowhere, I died in a place, in a position it's never happened before. And not showing any anger, but being mad as hell, I simply just walked away from the game. I didn't even finish it. I went around the corner. And then he started a game shortly after that. And he got through the first difficult stage, like I say, the first 350,000, and then he's off and he's going. He's beyond 2 million points. And I'm just watching, and there's a whole crowd of people watching. I just slowly walked away and went around the corner to do my own thing in a fit of disgust. Like, how could I have let this happen after all these years? This is crazy. And I'm on the other side of the aisle of games when I hear, which sat me up. And I jumped away from my game, and I ran over to look there, and I go, oh, wow, gee, that's too bad. He died with one dot on the screen in a manner he never died before. And I said, oh, wow, that's terrible. Naturally, I was laughing inside. I wouldn't admit it at the moment. But he finished his game. He finished all the way to the end, and he finished 90 points shy of a perfect score based upon the death. So he actually did what I did before I did it. He just died one time. And that was the end of that event. And we both went home. And this time, not being able to just sit on the situation as I had for 13 years, I woke up a half an hour in the morning before everybody. I went to bed a half an hour late, and I just practiced for half an hour. And after about 6 weeks, on July 1st, which is Canada Day, I flew there, and I proclaimed that I was going to do it, before the 4th of July. And sure enough, on July 3rd, that's exactly what happened. So, yeah, it was the U.S. versus Canada, and oh well, somebody has to come in second.
So how long does that take to get the perfect score?
Oh, it took a little over 4 hours. Now, in doing it, I sent a press release out saying I was going to do it. So there were crowds and crowds of people there. There was even media there. There was a guy from the Boston Herald who was constantly walking up to the game, interviewing me in the middle of the game. There were times when I stopped. And actually on the final board, I actually stopped on the final board as I was playing the final board. And I actually did an interview in the midst of playing the game. And so it took me longer than it otherwise would have. But it's normally about 4 hours to get up to that point if you're playing real serious and really hard.
So the spot that you've got to kind of hide in order to be able to do the interaction where it's not going to disturb you while you're playing.
Yeah, you have to go there under the right circumstance. You can't just go there, but you have to know when to go there and how to go there. And it's something so simple, so easy that I could teach anybody. When I was at 257 last month, I taught a number of people that, people who really didn't play the game. And they said, "Oh, I could never do that." I said, "Sure you can. One time, here, watch." And I could even teach you guys.
Really? So it's just a pattern that you learn, or?
No, that particular one is a safe spot where the men actually trap themselves. They actually take themselves out of the equation, and then you're free to roam the board.
Wow.
So, and it was funny because the night before I was going there to do it, I'm like, Jesus, this last board is so hard. It's unbelievable. I think I'm going to get all the way up there and I'm just going to blow it. And I thought, wait a minute, maybe I can trap these guys. And it was something that had just never been done before, but I had this idea that it would work. And literally the night before the perfect game, I did it. And when I did it, it worked. And I thought, oh, wow, I just got to get there. Once I get there, it's easy. And I got there.
So how long does it take to explain how to do that?
Start the board. When you start the board, go immediately through the left tunnel as quickly as you can. As you're going through the tunnel, pull down. And the man goes through the tunnel and comes down, let go of the joystick, and you're there.
Wow, okay.
That's it.
That does sound pretty simple.
Yeah, it's some people call it the BC park spot because you're on top of a letter B and a letter C. Of course, I call it the Beat Canada park spot because that's what works.
So how long can you sit there?
Oh, you can sit there indefinitely. I mean, I've left the game on for more than a month sitting there.
Seriously? Wow,
Yeah.
That's amazing. You think that was part of the programming, or is that a glitch in the programming?
Everything at the end of the game is a glitch. In 1999, when I was flown to Canada, boy, that's bad language. In 1999, when I was flown to Tokyo, and I was on the stage at the Tokyo Game Show, and I was proclaimed the video game player of the century, I had a meeting in Namco's office with their inner circle of programmers, developers, a CEO, the founder of Namco, that's often referred to as the father of Pac-Man, and I refer to him as the godfather of video games. His name is Masaya Nakamura. They sat there and they explained to me it didn't matter what question I fired at them. They just shrugged their shoulders and said, "We have no idea." They said, "You know far more about Pac-Man than we know." And I'd ask them more questions. And they says, "We never thought anybody had scores like this were possible." And it really didn't matter what I fired at them. I just fired a couple questions and they came back with the answers I just gave you. Then they began to ask me questions. And for over an hour, I was fielding questions. It was the most unbelievable thing. I always said there wasn't a kid in the world who ever played video games who didn't want to sit in that seat at that exact moment. But what was unique about that was in an enclosed conference room in the offices of the CEO. But recently, at 257, there on a panel discussion with the designer of Pac-Man, Professor Ayatwani, people began to fire questions at him. And this time, in a public manner, he just shrugged his shoulders. He says, I don't know those answers. You'd have to ask Billy. And they'd ask a question, and he'd say, Billy's the one that knows these answers. None of us do. And so this story that I told about what happened in Japan behind those closed doors all these years, how do you know I'm telling the truth? I mean, how do you know it's not just something I'm making up? And so it was kind of refreshing to hear the professor say that in such a public setting. And it was really awesome before he left to pull him over and show him a little bit of Pac-Man played on a level like he had never seen before, and actually show him the split screen, which he had never seen other than a video or a snapshot. He actually saw it. He actually saw it played. I actually showed him how to clear it, and he said, I don't think I'll ever make it up there. I says, well, if you do, you know how to do it.
You know, I know what my highlight for the 35th birthday was? The professor was dancing to Pac-Man Fever.
That was him, not me.
Yeah. He was out there as Jerry Buckner was doing Pac-Man Fever. It was just great to watch him dance to it.
Yeah. No, he's a terrific guy, and it's the second time I've met him. But when I met him, he wasn't in Japan when I went. But when I met him in New York in 2007, 6, no, whatever it was, I didn't get to spend any personal time with him. There was no personal interaction, no personal conversation. But when I met him in Chicago at the 35th anniversary, there was tremendous personal conversation, interaction. He knows far more about me than I could have ever imagined. I suppose that's good. I suppose it could be bad too.
He's stalking you.
Yeah, well, I told him he should only believe the bad stuff. You know, the good stuff's not true. They just edit that in to make me look real. But he's like honest, and I say it with all respect. He's like a kid. He goes to these places. He's always smiling. He's always laughing. He doesn't belong in the corporate world. He doesn't have a serious bone in his body. He just, I mean it with respect when I say he never grew up. He never grew up. He never got old and grouchy. You know, he still plays. He still has humor. I think he still looks at life, you know, as fun, as games, as an adventure, and what's to come next. It's really refreshing just to listen to him talk.
Yeah, he seemed like really personable, really nice when I got just a few moments with him. So I could just imagine that extended. But yeah, that's great.
Yeah, when I was on the panel discussion, I noted that I says I liked it because he was having as much fun as me. When I'm on the panel, I always have more fun than everybody else, and I think the reason for that is people that are on the panel. David Bishop, who's there, who's the executive vice president. He's under a certain amount of pressure. Sure, he's there, he's having fun, but he's putting this event together, and he has a bottom line, and he has a budget, and of course, so does his boss, and so do the people under him. And there's always a certain amount of pressure that I never feel because I'm always there just to have fun, and to see the professor there with that same sense of enjoyment and fun and lack of stress. It was really super cool. I haven't seen that before out of somebody at that level in the industry.
Now, you also get to pal around a lot with Walter Day, though.
Who?
Walter.
Oh, yeah, but he's not famous. Don't worry about him.
And that's exactly what you told me that night when we were talking. So.
Yeah, he's the whipping post that we usually pick on, but there's a reason behind it. He was writing his book in 1998, which was all of the escapades that we went through in the 80's. And not only is every one of them true, but sometimes he was afraid to tell you the real truth. When he actually presented the book, and of course it goes through an editing process, some of the stories are left out of the book. So, there's an old joke, Walter will tell you the story and then Billy will tell you the real story. But the truth of the matter is that he's writing the book and he says, this is unbelievable. He says, I can't realize all this history I'm putting in here. He says, do you realize this has never been done? He says, do you realize when I'm done writing this book, he says, meaning Walter Day, he says, I will be the most famous person in gaming history. He says, and you'll be the second most famous. That'll be cool. And I says, yeah, that'll be cool. It didn't work that way. He's number 2, and he's a distant number 2, and he acknowledges that. So what I do is every time I tell you how he's not famous or don't worry about him or something like that, it's me, sticking it to him because of his original prediction. So that's all. And I always tell him, I say, boy, I says, my joke is, I says, boy, it really sucks to be number 2. So I'm told, anyway. So I'll pick on him. We'll be on a panel discussion, and I'll say, Charles Lindbergh was the first one to fly across the Atlantic, and I'll say, does anyone here know who the number 2 man is? And nobody ever knows. And I say, well, Walter's like the number 2 man.
Ouch.
He does. He takes the punishment pretty good, though.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Besides Pac-Man, you've also worked with Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr., Burger Time, Centipede. Are there any other ones that were notable that I'm not mentioning?
Miss Pac-Man.
Miss Pac-Man, okay. I have your Wikipedia page up, and it doesn't bring up Miss Pac-Man. So.
Well, I had the record in Miss Pac-Man until my friend Chris took it away. He and I learned the game together. We learned Pac-Man together, Burger Time together, and basically everything. I'm the first one to say that everything I am in the gaming world I owe to him. The games we played together, we were always, pushing each other. He was either right behind me chasing me, or he was right in front of me, and I was, trying to take him down. But we learned together, and it was a level of competition between us that didn't exist if it wasn't for the two of us. When we sit there and we talk about the old days and we talk about the inner circle, there was no inner circle. There was he and I. And we had a 24-hour arcade here, a 24-hour arcade that between Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man and Junior Pac-Man and all the derivatives, it had over 100 Pac-Man derivative machines there.
Wow.
And it was 24 hours. And the fact of the matter is, when competitive gaming came to a close in 1986, just prior to that, we had been at an event in Canada where for the first time he went ahead of me in Miss Pac-Man. And that's when competitive gaming ended during the golden age. So that's where it's at. I think I'm going to start playing that again. So
I'm curious what the draw to specifically Pac-Man is for you. I mean, I know there wasn't a lot of variety of games back in that era. I mean, there were a few, but it expanded greatly in the 80s. But
I can answer that from a question that I was asked at the 35th anniversary, Pac-Man's 35th anniversary at 257, and
I wish I could have been there. I really do. I closed on my house that day, though. It was a big day. So.
Well, you got to keep your priorities straight.
Oh, okay.
You can close on your house any day. The 35th anniversary only comes once.
Yeah, I know.
All right. But what happened was I was asked what was my first memory of Pac-Man. And the truth is it was a hostile memory in sense. And what it is I played a lot of pinball. I was very competitive. I mean, I was, the guy to beat. And then video games started coming on the scene, and it's like, I'm trying to get to the back of the pinball. Specifically, I remember playing Gorgar, and I remember thinking, this damn yellow thing and all these people standing around it, and I got to get around this machine. I finally get to the back of the arcade, and I'm playing, and everybody's all worked up, but all the competition was on video games now, and I'm like, I'm annoyed because, being competitive. So I really liked Donkey Kong, and that had a lot of people around it too. So I started playing, and I got better than anyone in the arcade, and I traveled to other arcades, and I got better than anyone there. And I'm traveling around the state, and everywhere I go, I'm stopping playing. I'm seeing high scores, and nobody can beat the high score. And that's when I started getting tough, and I'm trying to find out what is the clearinghouse for high video game scores. This is before Walter and Twin Galaxies were on my radar, and finally, I said to the guy at the arcade, which was in Aladdin's Castle, I says, yeah, where do they have contests on Donkey Kong? Because you're having this on Tron. He goes, or you had that contest on Tron. He goes, they don't have contests on Donkey Kong. And I go, why not? He goes, why would they? And I go, why wouldn't they? He goes, well, he says it's popular. He says, but it's not like Pac-Man. And I says, what do you mean it's not like Pac-Man? It's Donkey Kong. He goes, yeah. He says Donkey Kong's not like Pac-Man. And I go, what does that mean? He goes, well, Pac-Man's number 1. And I go, well, maybe I'll just become the best at Pac-Man just so I don't have to listen to this annoying conversation. So I started playing Pac-Man. So, yeah, my first memory of Pac-Man, it's kind of hostile. But that's what began that journey in that direction. And so I started playing it simply because I wanted the competition. I can't say I started playing it because I enjoyed the game, because when I first stepped up to it, wanting the competition, I hadn't played it yet. So again, although I did come to enjoy it, and I really got a kick out of people as I played it and as my score started to climb. It didn't matter how high my score climbed. There were people around me saying, "Oh yeah, no, I got higher than that. I got higher than that. I got up to the gold keys." Gold keys, man. I'm only in silver keys now. I wonder where those gold keys are. I'm playing and playing. Another guy says, "Well, after the gold keys, you get silver bars." Silver bars? Yeah. Shoot, man, how high is that? And I had no idea that the people were lying. I had guys tell me that you get way up there, you get Volkswagens, you get dragons. And so after a while, I realized that they were lying, because every time I'd go to watch them play, they couldn't get off like a half a dozen boards. And they'd say, "Oh, well, I'm just having a bad day." I go, "You seem to have a bad day often. Every time I'm around, you have a bad day." So anyway, like I say, it was amazing to me that, I mean, video games were great, but arcades were greater. And no matter what, everybody wanted to be the best. Everybody wanted to have the high score. And if they had to lie to get it, they would lie to get it. You know, they just couldn't perform, you know, when push came to shove. And you know, that happens to me even today. If I'm in a place, I can be at 257. And if somebody's playing a game of Pac-Man, which is pretty cool, and I'm walking by and I stop and I look at them, if they notice I'm looking at them, suddenly they stop and they won't play. And they go, "You want to play?" And I go, No, I'm just watching." "Oh, no, I don't want to play."
Excuse me.
Why? They think I'm going to pick on them or laugh at them? I don't understand it. You know, I guess, I don't know. I guess nobody throws a football around when Tom Brady's around because they're afraid he'll pick on them or something.
or have a critique about how to do it better.
Yeah.
So then that's the why you stuck around the Pac-Man and the Donkey Kongs and all that, because they were the more popular of that time era.
Right. Every time I played a game, there were games that I liked that weren't real popular. There were games that I liked that didn't have any level of competition to them because there just wasn't enough interest in them. Well, because of that, I didn't want to play them. I didn't want to play them because really I was playing for the competitive edge. Then there were games where instead of getting a set number of men, you get an extra man every 10,000. And for the most part, I didn't like playing those games because it wasn't that difficult, and there were too many people that were too good at it. It was annoying. You know, instead of having a dozen people, there were 1,000 people who were good at it because they were too easy, because you got men too often too easy. And they had different levels of difficulty. On level of difficulty, I'd say, "What's your high score?" I got 1,000,000 points. And then his friend says, "Well, the guy turned his level of difficulty down to 1. 1. You know, anybody can get it at 1. Even Walter."
So, what were some of the games that you like to play that you didn't really invest that much time in because it wasn't competitive?
Well, like Pac-Man was one. Yeah, that was one. Wow. I guess Galaxian was one, but although that one did have competition, by the time I started playing it a lot, it had waned a bit. And I didn't invest that much time in it. Basically, I did it because other guys on the football team that I was on, they played it. So they figured there was one game they could beat me at. So I thought, okay, well, here, I'll play this game just till I can beat them. That'll shut them up. And it worked. So,
So what about Defender? Did you ever give that one any time?
No, multiple guys. Again, it's a great game, but that, you know, I'm listening to the guy that has the world record. He says, well, he says, I get like 200 guys in reserve or 250 guys. He says, then I lay down and I rest for a while. I let 200 guys die, and then I start playing again. I look at him like, what kind of fun is that? So, Defender, Stargate's another, Robotron's another. Actually, Joust was one that I played, and I would say that I would regularly get around 1,000,000 points, which is just about the point where if I went a little beyond that, then I could play it continuously, forever. But again, that wasn't something that appealed to me. So
I got to say, that was one of my favorite games just because the concept was so different. You know, the eggs and the ostriches and flying in that way. It was the control was really interesting too.
Right. It was very unique.
Yeah. Let me ask you. I know a lot of these games back in the day had, the single motion control, your joystick, simple joystick, or maybe one or two buttons. How do you feel about like a lot of today's games have like half a million buttons on the thing? How do you keep control? I'm old school like you. I mean, I started with I didn't play Pac-Man quite as much, but I like games like Tempest and Kix. I don't know, Quix, however you say it, QIX. You probably recall that one.
Yeah, I do.
Very simple motions versus all these major controls. It just seems out of control. So.
Well, I'm always asked the question, like, what do I think about today's games, or do I play them, or why don't I, gravitate to them? Let's forget the fact that, the world's a different place when you're a teenager and you don't have any responsibilities to speak of.
Amen.
And you can spend all the recreational time you want.
Yeah.
When you get, if I always tell people, I say, if you're hungry, you're hungry. If you got a place to sleep, you do. And if you don't, you could sleep in the alley. It really wouldn't matter. But the day comes where you get a wife and you get kids and you have to look at things a whole lot differently. And the disposable time you have, you just don't have, period. End of paragraph. And if you do, I don't want to be anything like you. But the truth of the matter is, I always tell people that I don't play the games of today for a couple of reasons. Number one is I can't play a game that takes 9 fingers to play.
Right.
I sit there and watch my son play, and he does. He'll use all his fingers. He'll use 9 fingers to play and 1 finger just to hold the controller in place.
Oh.
That's the first reason. The second reason is I don't want to play anything he can whip me at. And he can whip me at every one of them.
So were you big into the in the earlier years, the home console games, or were they always the stand-up arcade games?
No, it was always arcade games. By the time, as we say, the golden age of video games, as it came to a close in 1986, and competition as we knew it back then came to a close, and the industry was going through changes, I looked at myself and I realized I couldn't just play video games forever. And I began to take my controlled obsessions, as I call them, and point them in productive ways and productive directions that would otherwise, eventually lead to careers. Then when we fast forward from, say, 86 to 99, video games like cars, like movies, when they near their 20th anniversary, they somehow become classics. They somehow gain a new level of respect and interest and value, and people start talking about them again, and with that, I then came back onto the scene. But again, the uncountable number of hours that it took to get as good as it did on the games that I did, the question is, am I going to invest those hours into that which is new into the industry? And the answer is no. Mm-hmm. It's no for the reasons that I already gave you, but it's also no because when I look at games today, and anybody who's too young, unfortunately, would disagree with me, the games today are not like the games from yesterday, if that's the way to call them. The games today tell a story. They're an adventure. You travel through time. You go through phases. You almost don't die. The games just keep going. Games in the 1980s were created for one reason: to take your money in less than a minute. So yeah. You didn't have a choice but to get good. You didn't have a choice but to play it on a level that's absolutely aggravating for almost anybody. I mean, I watch people play Donkey Kong, and I mean the average game must be under a minute, and it's just something that if you took somebody who's really good at games today and you say, here, play this game, they would just get nothing but frustrated. Yeah, I never gained the interest in today's games. Now I see games that are cool. I often get sent games. I get sent game systems for me to play, for me to give my opinion of, for me to basically give a positive word about that's somehow comes off as an endorsement. And normally I would have to have my son play it in order to, give me his opinion. But the fact of the matter is, there's no arguing with the graphics of today. The graphics of today are so unbelievable. I mean, they can make a game all by themselves, beyond gameplay, beyond the depth of any game. I always say the games of today, they can get by on nothing but their looks. They're incredible. There's no arguing that. And I say it's like people. Some people get by on nothing but their looks. I mean, some people get by on a whole lot more. Well, the games of the 1980s had to get by on a whole lot more.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They did. And they did. Going back to 257, the 35th anniversary of Pac-Man in Chicago. Again, the personal time and conversation with Professor Iatwani. He worked on Pac-Man for a year and a half. He had 6 different people working at different times, people on sound and people on graphics and such as that. I believe, and I don't know for sure, that he was the only full-time person on the game, but he worked on it for a year and a half. Well, he was seated to my right, and to my left was what I call modern Namco, cell phones, console games, things like that. And they said that they work on it as many as 20 or 30 games at a time. It'll take 2 months to put a game together. They'll have 30 to 40 people working on the game. It's just such a stark difference from the old days. Mm-hmm. I'd imagine they do what they do now, and I'd imagine they're better at it. I'd imagine they make more money at it, and that's why they do it. But it just doesn't have the same depth as games that were developed around the time of Pac-Man.
Those other games that you played, besides obviously Pac-Man, but the like the Donkey Kong Jr., Burger Time, Centipede, did they have the same kind of ability to find a hiding spot? Or did you have to play those games straight through to get to the high scores that you got?
As you said, Pac-Man has an obvious hiding spot that most people can use. Miss Pac-Man has hiding spots that only the highest caliber players could use. Burger Time also has hiding spots. Centipede, nothing. Donkey Kong, nothing. Donkey Kong Jr., nothing.
All right, so Centipede, Donkey Kong, and Donkey Kong Jr., that means you're straight up playing no holds barred that whole time that you've got to get to the score that you're trying to get to, your high score.
Correct.
So how long of a time commit is that? For, let's say, Donkey Kong, you'd gotten over 1 million on that one.
Yeah, Donkey Kong would be just under 3 hours.
Okay.
Donkey Kong Jr. would be just past 3 hours. In Centipede, again, you can get multiple guys, but you can't build up 200 or more guys. You can build up a total of 6 guys in reserve. Basically, you have about a minute to play with. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody run to the bathroom successfully back and forth in a minute, but that's it. But that's exactly what happened.
Well, and that was basically what my point. The point of my questions there were, because I was curious what what kind of preparation does that mean? You're not eating or drinking for a certain period of time before you start playing, or is there some sort of mental game you play with yourself before you you press the start button?
Well, in all the games except for Centipede, again, 3 hours is something you can certainly deal with food-wise, and you would just go to the bathroom before you start playing. You wouldn't drink in excess while you're playing. You sort of keep your body on the edge, just on the edge of dehydration. But Centipede, you would do it. You would literally have to be further on the edge of dehydration. When you eat things like bananas and noodles and things that are not going to run through you. Otherwise, again, you got about a minute. That's all you got.
All right.
Wow.
So there's been some weird things. I had a friend who almost got the Centipede record away from me. They actually pulled a curtain around him, and he did his business behind a curtain while he played. So
I was thinking that I had a broken leg, and I had to use a urinal at one point, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do to get past the tough parts. Maybe a curtain wouldn't have been so bad.
Yeah. So what was funny was he was playing, and he was off and running, and he was doing good, and it looked really positive for him. I don't know what to say. Honest to God, I wasn't in town. I was not in town. I was out of town. They had a power failure.
Oh.
I was out of town. Honest to God, I was. He knows I was, although he might have looked around the building at the moment, but he knows I was out of town. So.
Now, Billy, I know you got some sort of notoriety around the King of Kong.
Rule of thumb is only believe the bad stuff. None of the good stuff is true. They edit that in just to make me look human. So whatever question you have, fire it at me.
No, that was it. I was just wondering if you had something to share with that, because I believe you'd gotten a bad rap from that, and I just wanted you to be able to defend that, I guess.
Well, if you knew the real me, you'd be afraid to do this interview. So maybe it's better you don't know the real story. The truth of the matter is, it was a lot of fun. It was so many different people, players, so many of us that are so close were able to interact. But to draw a larger picture, at the time there was about 7 different film crews that were following us, and there were 2 of them that were larger, more serious, that we knew would make it to the finish line. The others who didn't quite make it to the finish line, some of them eventually sold their footage to the larger 2. The truth is, so take what you're talking about with the King of Kong and multiply it times 7, and we were in different countries and different continents, and it was really an awesome time. And the fact of the matter is that if you've ever seen a film, any film that goes 100% without exception the truth, it's probably the most boring film you've ever seen. So if you follow a storyline and you take that storyline and you add creativity to it, you add Hollywood to it, as I call it, then you can create something that's interesting and something that's emotional and thought-provoking. And that's what they did. Actually, that's what, again, there's been a few films, and that's what they all did. And I think that led to a greater, whether you want to call it positive or negative, a greater recognition of competitive gaming. It's a very obscure world, as I tell people. It's an obscure world, and there's the Hollywood creation that makes it even more odd. Speaking of oddness, for example, the idea that people are obsessed, people play games, people put it in front of their work, people do it, they go to, say, Fun Spot every day. In the movie, you would probably be led to believe that there's a whole culture like that. There's actually one person that fits that, and that's Brian Koo. He goes to Fun Spot every day. He actually moved up there. He's close to it. He retired from his banking position in New York. He's an odd duck. He's a nice guy, but he's an odd duck, and he fits the stereotype, and he does live in that world. But again, it's easy for him. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have kids, and he's a serious gamer. Would I trade that for what I have? No, not a chance. Never.
Yeah, and as I said at the beginning, you're a father of 3. You're running Ricky's world famous restaurant. I mean, yeah, I would assume that there's probably a lot more accomplishments with just those job titles than having the world record holder of a video game.
The truth of the matter is, my youngest is 16, and he'll go off to college somewhere in a couple of years. And does that create more disposable time for me and my wife to travel or have fun or have some recreational? Maybe, hopefully. And if it does, then I'll have more time for some of the silly stuff we talk about. But until then, I keep promising. I keep promising myself. Walter keeps promising me. Joel keeps promising me. We all keep promising each other that we're going to do one event a month, and that's all. Because we got to kind of have a normal life, all of us. One event a month. In May, we did 4 events, so we don't keep our promises too good.
Well, that's almost just one for each of you.
Yeah, you're right.
One for each of you.
Yeah, like coming up in the next event, because I just swear I'm not going to leave the house until it. The next event is July 30th through August 2nd. It's the Replay FX in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's there. Geez, they should have about 1,500 machines. It will probably be the largest event we've ever been a part of, and it's there that we're going to have the Kong Off competition called the Kong Off 4. Prior to that, we had it in smaller venues. We had it in arcades or there was a place called the One Up in Denver. But this one's actually at a really large venue, so it's part of a much larger venue, which Richie and I think will go over very well. And I'm very sure it will, actually. And where it'll actually grow from there, I don't know. I sometimes wonder how much it really can grow.
Yeah, now, I know earlier when we first started talking, you said that you started off with the pinball machines and that kind of arcade game. Is that going to be something that's incorporated into this event that you're going to in July?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're going to have the world's.
Pinball?
Yeah, I'm very sure they're going to have the world's largest collection of pinballs in one location. And the reason why that's unique is because just recently, in January, we were in Banning, California, for an event where Guinness asked Walter and I to count the number of pinball machines at one location and the number of people playing at one time in order to certify a new world record. And we did it. And we counted it. And it happened there in Banning. Well, I seem to think it's going to happen here again at Replay FX.
Well, I can't say I'll be able to make Replay FX, but we do. I just moved into Tarpon Springs down here in Florida. And we have I just found out that there's a place called Replay right in the little downtown area with about 20 old retro arcade, not just the video games, but mostly pinball machines. And I'm dying to get over there and check it out and see what they have in store.
Well, it's funny. I mentioned how we're in Banning. We got a new world record through Guinness. We're going to go to Pittsburgh July 30th. There'll probably be a new world record there. And then we go back to Banning the weekend of October 3rd, and I'm guessing the world record will go back there again. It's I don't know. It's just like a boxing match. It just goes back and forth.
Well, what's the current record?
Gee, well, the number of people playing pinball one place, one time was 331. And the number of machines was, geez, I actually don't know, it was about 700.
That's quite a collection. That's a pretty big arcade.
Yeah. When I was a kid, we'd go to the arcade and we used to say, gee, we're going to play every game at least one time. I'm glad I don't say that there.
No doubt.
And the last thing is in August 15th, there's the Icon event, which will be in Iowa. There in Ottumwa, where Twin Galaxies was, which is considered the birthplace of esports, modern-day esports, the birthplace of competitive gaming. There's a big plaque that's going up on the wall right there where the old arcade was. It was commissioned by Eric Tesler. And the fact is we're going to be there to proclaim Ottumwa, Iowa, as the birthplace of competitive gaming, the birthplace of esports, going all the way back to 1982. So that's the next 3 months. So
I assume you're going to have your tie on.
Well, I got it on right now.
Oh, outstanding.
So I got it on right now because after this I have to shoot a YouTube video for somebody like yourself. Just a favor, so.
All right. Well, we appreciate you taking time, and you didn't have to dress up for us, but we appreciate it.
All right.
So what's next for? I know you've got those personal appearances, but do you have anything exciting going on at the restaurant?
Lots of chicken wings.
Lots of chicken wings.
Walter keeps telling me that I got to go to one of these events, and instead of playing, instead of emceeing, instead of having the microphone in my hand, that I have to cook chicken wings for everybody. So sooner or later that'll happen. Come on, FX is going to be in Pittsburgh. It's going to be there at the end of next month, and neither one of you guys can make it there.
Next month in Pittsburgh. Let's see. I'm in Illinois. That's not that far, right?
July 30th.
July 30th. I'm not going to make any kind of commit, Billy, but I would definitely love to go there.
If you do, I'll get you in. If you do, I'll get you in the competition. Somebody's got to come in last.
I can guarantee it would be me.
You want to bet on that? I might be a stiff competition for last place, buddy. I'm going to make a note of that. It's July 30th through August 2nd, you said?
Yes. It's going to be, instead of just high scores, in the past we've done it just plain old high scores. But as Richie and I talk about it, people begin to play the game in manners that it wasn't meant to be played, where you're just sitting there scabbing for points. So this year, the first day will be just high scores to see how everybody does. But we're going to break it down to where you're actually in brackets, like March Madness, like basketball. And it's not, gee, I messed up, I'll start again. Gee, I messed up, I'll start again. No, you'll get one play, one shot. You're going against somebody else in the bracket, and the winner will advance in the bracket. Regardless of what score either one gets, the higher score will simply advance. And the truth of the matter is, the gameplay, the caliber of player is so high that with that in mind, as I just described it, anybody could win. Any one of the guys there could win, because they really are all that good.
And this is going to be just Donkey Kong itself, or is it going to have multiple games?
Yeah, the Kong Off competition is
Kong Off. Okay.
Yeah, Kong Off 4. It's simply that. It's just Donkey Kong. In the future, we'll have other games, but other individual competitions. But for now, it's Kong Off 4.
Wow.
Yeah, you just can't have a bad game.
You're right. Or you can have a bad man. You can have 3 bad men. You can't have 4.
Yeah. It sounds exciting, though.
No, you be there. I'll get you in the contest. I happen to know the right people.
You know the people. You can make some calls for me.
This is true.
Scott, do you have anything that you wanted to ask?
No, I think I really enjoyed this. Okay.
Come on, don't you guys have any tough questions here?
Okay.
Something controversial?
So something came into mind earlier today. You're familiar with the movie Wayne's World, right?
Yes, not that well, but yes.
Okay. Well, there was a character in there. He had this arcade. He was the sponsor of their show, their cable show, and he had an arcade. And one of the games that he had in his arcade, he explained that it was unbeatable. You would get to one certain level, and it was programmed in the game that you could never beat it. So the kids would just keep pumping the quarters in, just trying to get past that level. Have you ever come across a game that has stumped you?
Absolutely. Now, there's games where the reason why the game ends in Pac-Man on the split screen is in order to advance to the next board, you eat 244 dots, and the game advances to the next board. Then you eat 244 dots, and the game advances to the next board. That's what tells the game to advance. Mm-hmm. Well, on the split screen, you don't have 244 dots. You don't even have close to that, not even close. So it doesn't matter. You can eat all the dots. There's nothing left to do but die. The game won't advance. So that, not standing that, or let's say that doesn't count because you don't have the opportunity. Mm. But when I was playing Burger Time and my score was climbing and I was obviously at the world record, I came across, they always said that board 20 was the kill screen. When you got to board 20, it didn't matter how many men you had. If you didn't have peppers, you couldn't do the board. You just simply couldn't do it. And so I learned how to do it rather easily with just a couple of peppers.
Wow.
Well, then, board 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 7, 8, and board 28 on Burger Time, when you see it, it is the most unbelievable, most ridiculously difficult thing that you could ever do. We started laughing at it. I had a group of friends around. I played all the way up to it the first time I got there. If you can imagine Burger Time, you have a pepper or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. You try to build them up. The first time I got there with over 200 men in reserve and 82 peppers. It was like some kind of joke. 82 peppers, and I couldn't do the screen. I mean, I couldn't do it.
Wow.
So I kept trying. And one day, again, I got there with over 200 men, and I started the screen with 77 peppers. And when it was all said and done and I cleared the screen, I had 14 peppers left. And so since then, I watched it play and play and play and play and play, and nobody, even my friends, nobody ever got past board 28 until Brian Wagner came along, who I met up in New Hampshire, and he's gotten past board 28. And he's the only other one I know who ever has. But it is the most ridiculous thing. I've had people play it. I say, clear this board. I'll give you 1,000 to 1 odds. I'll bet you $1. So I would collect $1 at a time, risking $1,000, even though that wasn't a risk.
So how many boards are on that game?
I'd imagine there's 256.
Oh, because of the bits, certain amount of bits,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
Correct. So that was a Z80 processor back in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So board 28.
Wow.
28 in Burger Time.
Yep. Play it and call me back.
You know, I wish I could find it. I haven't seen that game in 30 years.
Oh.
I mean, I haven't seen. Well, then again, there's not a lot of arcades.
Yeah.
They don't exist the way they used to back.
Yeah.
They were on every corner before.
Yeah. I'll see one in about a half an hour as soon as I hang up because I gotta go somewhere.
Well, I'm sure you're not going to be playing to board 28, though.
No, I'll just walk past it and pretend.
Yep. Just remember.
All right.
All right, Billy. I appreciate your time tonight.
You're always
Yeah.
welcome. We'll talk
Thank you
again.
very much.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Bye.
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 We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80's Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80's Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80's Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.